Swedish? Well, I have done that for you. I've looked under the name Oromoyo, and as you can see, this is one of the authoritative French dictionaries. As you can see, under the name Oromoyo, it cites or it gives the explanation of two names, Aramean and Syrian. Another authoritative or leading dictionary is an English one. Here it's the same meaning. Oromoyo means Syrian as well as Aramean. Now, an Aramaic dictionary, this is the leading dictionary consulted and used by most of our teachers and bishops and clergymen, is by a Chaldean scholar and Archbishop of Urmia. And if we consult this dictionary and we look under the word or the entry Oromoyo, Aramean, what we find is Oromoye honauden Syrioye. Leshono Oromoyo Syrioyo. And below I have given the translation, as you can see, which is Oromoyo or Arameans, that is Syrians. And with respect to the language, it says the Aramaic language is the same as the Syriac language. And if we read and study his preface or introduction, one can also find quotations like the Aramean name is our genuine and original name. Now this is very briefly about the interrelationship between these two terms. One can talk for hours about that, but I won't do that. I will conclude with the highest authority in the Syrian Orthodox Church is the Syrian Orthodox Patriarch, who less than a month ago wrote on the website, this is a print screen of that page, he wrote an article about the culture, I think it was the culture and something, science, I think, and the relationship between the Syrians and Greeks in that respect. And in the article initially he says that the Syrians were originally called Arameans. In his book, published by the bishop who was here from Aleppo in 83, he wrote the following. He said the Syriac language is the Aramaic language itself, and the Arameans are the Syrians themselves. He who has made a distinction between them has erred, has made a mistake. Now, as you would say in Swedish, det är inte min åsikt, det är en fact, however you would pronounce it. So, this is an established fact that these two names are synonyms. Now, the next point is about the Aramean nation. One can also talk about ours, as Bahjat already tried to do, understand ourselves as a nation, as a people. And he quoted some interesting scholars like Benedict Anderson, there's like Ernest Gellner, and there's like Anthony Smith, and so many more scholars who have written about this topic. Now, I've also been inspired by those same scholars, and this is part of another lecture, how you can define yourself as a group, as an ethnic group. Now, the term nation, I know, has a political... it's also politically motivated, the nation. We can also call ourselves a people. But nation in the sense that we are just a people. I'm not suggesting here that we are a nation state or a state, because as you all know, we have no state of our own. Now, if we look at our historical land, our homeland, so to say, then everybody here knows that we come from southeast Turkey, we come from the northern parts of Iraq and northeastern part of Syria, and also from Lebanon. And if we study the Syriac Aramaic literature, you find here manuscripts that use these terms, like Bith Nahrin, which means Mesopotamia, or Oram Nahrin, which means Aram Nahrin, Aram of the two rivers, Bith Oromoye, the house of the Arameans, or the place of the Arameans, or Orom, and Lebanon. All these are geographical or topographical descriptions to describe the place that has given birth to our people, to our literature, to our culture, and to our identity. And this is a manuscript from the Vatican, which I discovered, and I was the first who published it. I haven't seen anyone else publishing it yet. I've translated, and here you can find terms like Orom Nahrin and Orom and Bith Oromoye. The other question one should ask himself is, okay, who represents the Aramean nation, or who does the Aramean nation, or one can say, like, what does the Aramean nation consist of? And if we look at our literature, again we see that there are different Christian communities who are based on the Aramaic cultural heritage, and these are, for us, as the Syriac Universal Alliance, part of the Aramean nation. It's the Syriac Orthodox, the Syriac Catholics, the Syriac Protestants, and as well as the Nestorians. And you have the old Nestorians, as they call them, and those who have rejected the old calendar and used the new one. They have called their church in 1976 Assyrian. And there's also the Chaldean church, the biggest one in Iraq, or the Maronite church, which is based in Lebanon, and the Melkite church, which is mostly based in Syria. Now, the Aramean nation, you can also speak, of course, about other Arameans who have forgotten their identity, who have become Arabs, Kurds even, or Turks. I won't talk about them. For us, if we talk about the Aramean nation, I signify these Christian communities in the first place. These are for us the core members. If we talk about the Aramean nation and its language, the language, as you all will know, is Aramaic. But the language has many dialects. Some communities can understand each other, while other communities who speak the Aramaic language in different forms, they cannot understand the language. If you look, for example, in Tur Abdin. In Tur Abdin you see different varieties of Aramaic between the Midyat dialect and the villages. Especially there's a nice distinction between Midyat and the dialect of Medan, for example. They understand each other, but this understanding comes from the fact that there was a lot of interaction. Now, the further you go from the geography of Tur Abdin, and the less interaction there has been taking place, the less chance that people understand each other. And that's what I mean with unintelligible dialects. And this is what you find, for example, between Tur Abdin Aramaic and the Aramaic in certain parts of Iraq, or even in Turkey, for example. Now, if we look at the Syriac Orthodox community, we find two Aramaic dialects in particular. It's the first dialect which we use in our church. It's the literary dialects, which we also find in our magazines, which has its own script. And we also have another dialect, which I started to greet you and salute you this evening, which I call Tur Abdin Aramaic, because it's the Aramaic dialect which originated from Tur Abdin. And I think, I have to mention this as well, some scholars have said that Tur Abdin stems from Edessan Aramaic, and because Tur Abdin Aramaic is kind of tainted by Arabic, Turkish and Kurdish, that's why it's like a hybrid language. And that's why we don't appreciate this dialect, because it's tainted by foreign words and expressions and languages. Now you can see the same thing in Edessan Aramaic. Edessan Aramaic is also not pure, but the point is, Tur Abdin Aramaic did not develop from Edessan Aramaic. These are both distinct dialects related to each other, but distinct dialects, and we should appreciate both of them. And especially we should appreciate Tur Abdin Aramaic, because this is the language we speak at home, and nobody here among us speaks with each other Edessan Aramaic. It's our literary dialect. We can promote it as well, but in the first place we should care about the language we have learned from our parents and grandparents. Now let me give you very briefly an introduction about the organization I preside over today. We call it the Syriac Universal Alliance. It was established in 1983 in New Jersey, and one can say that the two main goals were very simple actually, because as a result of the diaspora, first of all, our people thought we have to keep our people together. Our people is dispersed, lives all over the world, so what we have to do is to organize ourselves, keep them together. And the second point was, as a result of our diaspora situation, we have to combat assimilation. Last year I spoke about it at the conference in Berlin, and I mentioned that assimilation today in the diaspora, the loss of our identity, is maybe among the top 3 of our threats today as a people. Now, how we are organized is very simple. Maybe some of you know, and others maybe do not know, that we have a national federation here, the Syrianska Riksförbund. As I said, its chairwoman is here among us, Arzu Alan from Nojbori. And we have between 30 and 35 local associations, Vereningen, you would call them in Swedish. The domain, we are not active, for example, sometimes we attend them, interreligious freedom conferences, but we are not pursuing religious interests here. We are not active in the religious field. We are not a member of the Council of Churches, either of Sweden or the European Council of Churches or the World Council of Churches. No, the Syriac Universal Alliance is a member, has a special consultative status at the United Nations. And I will talk about it in a few seconds. But first, let me tell you that because we are not a religious organization, we are a secular organization, although we accept the fact that we have been Christians for almost 2,000 years, and we appreciate that, we also understand the current